in a way, it's a trend. I mean, I'm not saying there are no challenges to India's rise, there are. But the direction of India's rise, I think, is very clear. In a way, it's unstoppable. So when we speak today about, the rise of countries, I also want to end with that point. Rise of countries are determined by the countries. The rise of India will be determined by India. It will be determined by our strength, not by the mistakes of others. So let me stop there. And on the long view, let me make 3 big points. One, that the Indian Ocean region, it's an ecosystem. It had, there's a book many years ago written called Empires of the Monsoons. So there was a whole monsoon-driven ecosystem, centuries of exchanges. And what had happened was the colonial period actually broke it up. So the Indian Ocean, perhaps much more than many other parts of the world, is in the process of a recovery and a rebuilding. Individual states are doing that, but the whole region, in a way, if you look today at the restoration of the trade patterns, the restoration of connectivity, we are trying to rebuild our connectivity towards the east through Myanmar to Southeast Asia. We are rebuilding our connectivity to the west through IMEC into the Arabian Peninsula and further through the international north-south transport corridor to Iran and through Iran into Eurasia. So you have this whole rebuilding process underway, which I think is one feature of Indian Ocean we need to recognize. Its connectivity, its mobility, its trade patterns. It is also the modern manifestation of an integrated ecosystem. The second point I would make is a lot of this would happen. It requires hard work. It can't be done by sloganeering. It can't be done by just throwing out an idea and leaving it out there. And I would say in the last decade, Indian diplomacy, in a way, we have invested an enormous amount into that recovery and rebuilding process. For the first time, you have an integrated view of the Indian Ocean, Sagar or now Mahasagar. It begins with very basic stuff, even diplomacy. There were countries in the Indian Ocean where we had not had a high-level visit for decades. Australia, Sri Lanka, for 2-3 decades, there were no high-level visits. Now, if you see just the diplomatic energy over the last decade, we've done, in a way, much more than perhaps 4 or 5 decades before that. But again, it's not just a visit. You've got to do things on the ground. So what we have done in India, in many ways, has been a foundation for what we try to do in our relationship with the Indian Ocean. So we have right now, for example, a unique identity card project which we are working on with Sri Lanka. We did a metro, a very successful metro project with Mauritius. We are discussing a specialty hospital with Seychelles. So, until we do projects, until we take our experiences out there, until we actually prove to them that their lives are better off by being part of a greater whole, I don't think we can build that kind of, neighborhood spirit or neighborhood watch. And, there'll be the good periods when you can plan and do it. There'll be times of stress. I mean, Sri Lanka, for example, went through that, that severe economic crisis. And the fact was finally the most substantive and the fastest support really came from India. Recently they had this, the cyclone, Ditwa. We were there within 24 hours. So the point I'm making is that if we have to build a kind of an Indian Ocean sentiment or spirit or identity, call it what you will, it's not just about broadcasting it or stating it, or it has to be backed up with resources, with work, with commitments, with practical projects, so that people know that you are actually serious about it. And here the institutions help. I mean, one colleague referred to the Fusion Center. I think all of us have a stake in it. IORA. Now, surely we can do more with IORA. I mean, I would say right now we are looking at how do we intensify IORA activities and scale it up. Or we have a proposal called the Colombo Security Conclave. So I think there are different dimensions of this, how do you build the Indian Ocean. And my third point relates to India, which is obviously, the Indian Ocean is the only ocean named after a country. And the reasons are obvious, we are right in the middle of it. But I do want, the rest of the Indian Ocean to appreciate that India, in a way, India's rise is a lifting tide. That with our growth, I think other countries of the Indian Ocean stand to benefit. Those who work with us obviously will get more benefits. And in a way, it's a trend. I mean, I'm not saying there are no challenges to India's rise, there are. But the direction of India's rise, I think, is very clear. In a way, it's unstoppable. So when we speak today about, the rise of countries, I also want to end with that point. Rise of countries are determined by the countries. The rise of India will be determined by India. It will be determined by our strength, not by the mistakes of others. So let me stop there.